Abduction em São Tomé das Letras, Minas Gerais, after the intro. Hello everyone, I'm Edison Boaventura. Welcome to our channel. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe to our channel. Become a supporter and help us out because we're on a campaign to reach 250,000 subscribers. So, if you like this video, later share it with your relatives, friends, and people who are interested in enigmas and mysteries. So without further delay, let's get to this interesting case. This abduction case happened in Minas Gerais in 1984 and was investigated by the pioneering researcher Irene Grank from CISN, an unidentified flying object research center in Rio de Janeiro. And she wrote an article for this magazine here, Espacio e Tempo, a Spanish magazine, and it was published. So they were in another dimension, so she ended up including this case, writing about this case. And she, besides showing the abduction, which even included hypnosis, she says that suddenly the couple who was abducted might have been taken to another dimension. And as I tell you the story of this case, you'll notice that it's possible they entered a time rift into another dimension. But there are also elements of abduction, the beings, right, like the greys, and there are unidentified objects that were also seen by the couple. So this abduction case research by Mrs. Irene Grank is really interesting, right? This researcher from Rio de Janeiro, who unfortunately has already passed away. So let's take it step by step. The case happened with two main witnesses who are Leila Rocha, 27 years old. She was married at the time to Moisés Martins Teixeiras, 25 years old. And Moisés, he was a businessman, right? So he ended up going to the São Lourenço area to spend his vacation and all, and he ended up being recommended there by people. São Tomé das Letras is nearby. It's a fascinating place. If you take this road here in 40 minutes an hour at most, you'll get there. A very picturesque, unique town. So they decided, right? Since they were on vacation, the couple decided to go to São Tomé das Letras. So on October 12th, 1984, around 8 in the morning, they got in their car and set off for São Tomé das Letras, right? Just imagining, you know, from São Lourenço to São Tomé das Letras, it would take them less than an hour, right? To get there. But they ended up taking much longer and had the impression that they got lost along the way. Even though it was a road without many forks to get there, they realized that maybe they got lost along the way. And along the way, they met a man on the road who wasn't dressed like someone from the countryside. There. They thought that was kind of strange, right? And this person ended up asking them for a glass of water. And he said that he had another friend who was coming behind, that they would probably meet, and that he would also ask them for water. This second man didn't show up, right? Asking for water. And they thought it was strange because there were waterfalls, plenty of water along the way. So there was no reason to stop there and ask for water, right? And their appearance, you said, didn't look like a countryman, right? The local resident there was really, really different in this man, right? When they were talking, they gave him some water and all, and suddenly he vanished out of nowhere. He disappeared right in front of the witnesses, who were even shocked. But they continued their journey to try to reach São Tomé das Letras, right? So the couple continued their journey and soon came across a waterfall, also a small cascade that was there, and finally they reached their destination. They entered a square right by the church in the village, as if it were a village there, and they discovered that all the residents were there, like at the window watching, but when they got close, they would close the window, right? They thought that attitude was kind of strange, right, from those people. And they went to the square, right? When they got to the main square, they found some kind of phone. Look, the story is kind of strange, right? Let's keep following along. Then they found the phone. Layla decided to call her parents in San Lorenzo. So she called, talked to them, and said she would be late because they took a long time to get to the supposed São Tomé das Letras and wanted to arrive later, right? What happened? Her father answered the call and everything, and then, right? When they went back to San Lorenzo, her father even confirmed that he got a call from Layla, right? She said she wanted to arrive later and everything was fine. Moises, while she was making the call, was waiting on the other side of the square, and he saw a group of about 20 people there. They were kind of gathered. It looked like they were talking about something. And about 25 meters or so from where they were, so it was pretty close. He even thought about getting closer to those people, right? But when he turned around, those people simply disappeared. There were only the buildings there in the square, right? And all of this, they remember, let's say, in a conscious state. They didn't need hypnosis to remember that. So they remembered up to that point. What happens? When they came back, they took the same path there and ended up arriving in the city, right? In San Lorenzo, everything, but it was already very late. It's like there was this lost time, you know, this kind of confusion in my head. Mrs. Irene Grank and Gilda Mora chose to do hypnosis there and study the case more closely. They also called Dr. Silvio Lago, who was a hypnotist at the time, to do hypnosis separately, both with Moises and Layla, right? And during Moises' hypnosis, he revealed, right? In a hypnotic state, he noticed 3 faces, right? Of those people, 1 man and 2 women. And he was surprised by their beauty, right? The beauty of those beings there, the feminine faces as well, he said. Man, there were no signs of age, nothing like that. It was really something beautiful. They had green and striking eyes, and they also had long hair, you know, kind of brown, kind of curly. And he also said that these people weren't from around there. During Moises' hypnosis session, right? He said that no, definitely these beings weren't from there. And it also appears in his hypnosis that it was already dark when Moises and his 6-year-old brother, right, along with Layla, made their way back to San Lorenzo. And then what happened? At a certain point on the road, when they were already heading back, the car's electrical system stopped working, right? There was a blackout there, and then the flashlight they were carrying also ran out of battery too. So they couldn't even turn on the flashlight to focus to see what happened. Until Moises exclaimed inside the car, he said, "Look at that moon, what a beautiful moon," and so on. And then Layla said, "No, the moon is on the other side." They ended up seeing 2 objects, one on one side of the car and the other on the other side, which apparently looked like the moon, but they were 2 unidentified flying objects. They're glowing, 2 moons supposedly, one on each side, right? And then Layla started to get like this in a kind of catatonic state, let's put it that way, right? Kind of sleepy. And then, sensing some kind of fear or problem that could happen, she said, "Let's get out of here immediately." And that's what they did. They ended up leaving the place and went on their way, and they arrived in front of the road, right? Then she still had that bad feeling that something bad could happen. She warned, be careful, something dangerous is ahead. And then they started paying attention, but there wasn't anything that could justify it. And they arrived at the hotel. It was 10:30 post-meridium since they left, right? To the supposed São Tomé das Letras, 8 hours had passed, right? So quite a long time. And it wouldn't be that much. They lost a lot of time on the road, right? Apparently, that's what they thought. So they decided to do hypnosis to see if anything would come out. Moises then remembered those 2 moons. In the hypnosis that was done with Leila Rocha, she says that, right? Silvio Lago here, that she quickly entered a deep hypnotic state. In other words, she went into a very deep hypnosis. And she remembered a tall man who was walking toward her on the road and that the car had stopped. And she said that this being had big black eyes, right? Here it's really like a gray, right? And it made her kind of scared. So she started moaning and crying, right? This happened during hypnosis, desperately saying, what eyes, right? So during hypnosis, she kept saying that, right? Impressed by those black eyes, right? But at the same time that she felt attracted to that being, it's as if she knew the man very well. So what did he do? He gently took her by the arm and led her to a house inside a cave. It's made of some big pieces of stone, like those houses in São Tomé, really, But he said that inside this house, it was intensely lit by a bluish light. The man said it belonged to that place and that she should stay there, And then she started to get scared, started crying again. Because of everything, because she said she didn't want to leave her husband or her parents, When she arrived, right? At a certain point in the hypnosis, there was a hypnotic block. She couldn't go any further. And then Dr. Silvio Largo brought her out of the hypnotic state. But it was at that moment, right, that these things were happening, right? When the being grabbed her by the arm. Her husband, who had already gone through hypnosis, was in another room, came in there and had already been there for a while. He ended up entering the room and the husband asked as soon as he came in, interrupting the hypnosis, he said, hey, did the man touch you? And then the wife in a hypnotic state said, I don't know, but she seemed a bit hesitant there, right? And then later, Dr. Silvio Largo ended up deciding to end the session and everything. And it was kind of strange, right? It became a situation where there were a lot of mental blocks during that abduction there, possible abduction that happened. But the interesting thing about all this is that when they went back to Rio de Janeiro, since they lived in Rio de Janeiro, they had gone to spend their vacation there at their parents' house in São Lourenço. And then they decided to go to São Tomé. That's when they went back to Rio de Janeiro. They found out, after some time that she was pregnant, right? And this is something interesting to mention as well. We don't know if it's related or not. But she said that the girl was born the following year. So the thing happened in 84 and in 85. The girl was born and she was a very beautiful girl, right? Also intelligent, and she had paranormal precognition powers. She saw the future of some things, right? It's stated here, right, in the research by Mrs. Irene Grange, that this girl, right, the couple's daughter. And now it's worth making a side note here, right? And to point out that the husband said they didn't have sexual relations while they were in São Lourenço or in São Tomé das Letras. So there wasn't any. She got pregnant and the child was born. That's a strange and curious fact, isn't it? And then it's recorded here in the research by Mrs. Irene Grange that this little girl, right, this girl at 5 years old, one day when she was coming back from school, she told her mother that one of the boys had his face covered in blood, right? And that wasn't true at that moment. But a week later, the boy ended up falling, and what she had said became reality. So in other words, to prove even the issue of precognition that she had, right, that she could see the future there were some prophecies. And on another occasion, it's also reported that she called her grandmother, right? The little girl called her grandmother and said, "Hey, Daddy was in a car accident." And that really happened, right? Unaware, she was at home and called her grandmother saying, "Hey, my dad was in a car accident." And then the same thing had happened. Another curious detail about this story is that 4 years later, in 1988, on one of those trips, they actually got to know São Tomé das Letras. So they ended up going there again, and it didn't take all that time, all those hours. And then when they arrived in São Tomé das Letras, they said, right? Later, comparing one thing to another, they said it's nothing alike. The place we were at in 1984 was a different place. We thought it was São Tomé, that we had arrived in São Tomé. But it's not São Tomé das Letras, because it's a completely different place. So that's also something really unsettling, right? So the place they visited in 1984 doesn't exist. It's outside of reality. That's why I believe that matter. Mrs. Irene Graham, she discusses another dimension. Or did they enter there into a portal, something like that, something completely different? I'm here speculating, conjecturing. And never again after that time, this couple, right? Layla and Moises never found that same road again. They couldn't find the road anymore, right? And could it be that they went, to another dimension? Could they have gone to São Tomé? But in another astral plane there, in another astral body. But if we think about the astral body, there wouldn't be that physical part that she mentioned, right? To her father there, she said, "Hey, we're going to arrive later, this and that," right? So if it was an abduction, it was an abduction, I don't know, in the astral body and also in the physical body, right? Because there were also the touches, right? The things, that strange being with black eyes that was seen. So it's a very curious abduction, right? Researched by Donna Irene Gramsci, and today I'm bringing you images and information. We don't have any more information about this case. That's what she published in this Spanish magazine here, right? Space and time, and it was recorded there, right? In the article itself, there are some photos like this that illustrate the experience they had. Strange, right? So the being there with black eyes, the hypnosis sessions, right, that were conducted. There are some photos from São Tomé, and the drawing here shows the car with the two moons, right? Mrs. Gilda Mora as well, who is a well-known psychologist along with the couple, right? So here is the record of this abduction. I don't know if you are already familiar with this case. If you were or not, let us know in the comments of this video. Leave your comment. What do you think about this abduction, right? I found it to be something really different, within ufology. Why do you think it was an abduction involving entry into another dimension? It's really something quite different, right? So leave your comments if you like this video. And see you in the next show, video, or podcast with Edison Boaventura.